boring history for sleep, how medieval monks counted time without clocks. Hey guys, tonight we're stepping barefoot onto the cold stone floor of a medieval monastery. You're wrapped in a rough woolen robe, and the only light in your cell comes from a stubby beeswax candle. Its flame dances shadows across the walls that have probably never seen a proper scrubbing. Outside, the moon sulks behind some clouds. The world is silent except for the occasional hoot of an owl and the distant mutter of a monk mumbling Latin in his sleep. You're here to discover something deceptively boring, yet strangely mesmerizing: how medieval monks counted time without clocks. And fair warning, you probably won't survive this era unless you're very, very okay with waking up to bells at 2:45 in the morning. That's not a joke. The night was basically chopped into chunks, like a badly cut pie, and nobody cared if you were dreaming of angels or just trying to forget the lentil stew. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your city and local time in the comments. Let's see who's time traveling from where. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle through the cloister with your candle stub footsteps echoing. There's no such thing as a wristwatch. Those are centuries away. And sundials. Those are fine if you're outside and the sun is cooperative. But right now, it's the middle of the night, and the clouds have swallowed the moon. So how do you know what time it is? Simple. You don't. You rely on the tools around you: natural light, the smell of burnt wax, even how cold your feet feel by the third hour of vigil. Monks learned to tell time by rhythm. The candle, for instance, wasn't just for light. Some were marked with black lines, each line showing roughly 20 minutes of burn time. As the wax melted down past each mark, time slipped away, drip by drip, into memory. You might be thinking, wait, wouldn't drafts ruin that? Yes, they would. Welcome to medieval accuracy: one puff of wind, and suddenly it's prime when it's supposed to be lauds. It's chaos in slow motion. Outside sundials ruled the daylight. Some were built right into the monastery walls. A little stick called a gnomon, which is possibly the least sexy word ever invented, cast a shadow across a stone face. The monks would know, for example, that when the shadow hit the crack between two bricks, it was time to pray or chant or harvest barley. But those sundials had a diva-like dependence on sunlight. Cloudy day, no time for you. Winter, good luck. You might as well ask a sleepy goat for the hour. So monks developed a kind of internal metronome. Think about it. You wake up every day to the same bells, pray at the same times, eat the same gruel. Eventually, your body just knows. You don't need to ask what hour it is. You feel it in your bones, in the ache of your knees, in the number of times you've kneeled today. And if you're wondering how singing fits in, well, that's your next clue. The length of a chant, say a psalm or a hymn, was a timekeeper. Some orders timed prayers by how long it took to finish a certain song. It's like measuring your morning by how many times you've played your favorite playlist, except instead of Taylor Swift, it's Gregorian chant about the agony of St. Lawrence. One quirky detail: some monks allegedly trained birds, yet actual birds, to chirp or sing at certain times of day. Imagine relying on a feathered assistant to hit the high note at dusk. Historians still argue Whether this was a widespread practice or just some eccentric monk's feathered fever dream, but honestly, it's too charming not to mention. By now, your candles burned down past the halfway mark. You're sitting alone in a drafty room, waiting for the bell that signals matins, the early morning prayer. You don't check your phone because, well, heresy, you don't look at a digital clock, you just wait, listen, smell, sense. You know it's nearly time because the air has shifted. The walls seem to breathe in sleep. Somewhere a door creaks, someone coughs, and then you hear it, a hollow thunk of footsteps down the hall. The sacristan. He's been entrusted with the sacred responsibility of keeping track of time by candle or by instinct, and now he's shuffling to the bell tower. Soon a single bell will toll once, twice, maybe 7 times. And just like that, it's a new hour. Not because of gears or springs, but because someone said it is. In this world, time isn't a number, it's a feeling. You don't get to hit snooze. The bell rings through stone and bone alike, deep echoing slightly off key. You jolt upright in your cot, half covered by a wool blanket that smells faintly of dust and repentance. Welcome to Matins the first of 7, or if you're unlucky, 8 canonical hours that structure your every waking moment. And some of your sleeping ones too. Time in this world is not yours. It belongs to God. You shuffle bleary-eyed into the cold corridor. Bare feet slap against damp flagstones. Nobody talks. Why would they? Words aren't needed. The bell speaks for everyone. It tells you now you pray. And later now you scrub cauldrons. And eventually now you get to collapse back into bed for 90 minutes before it all begins again. Monasteries don't run on clocks, they run on bells. That's not a metaphor. The bell tower is the beating heart of the building. And it's the sacristan, remember him from last section, who keeps it alive. He watches the candles, reads the sky, and makes judgment calls that would terrify a modern factory manager. If he rings the bell early, a monk might fast too long. Too late, someone might miss Mass. Or worse, they might enjoy a few seconds of unearned leisure. Can't have that. Each bell has a name. You might hear the signum for terce, the gentle clang for sext, or the hurried chime for compline when everyone's ready to call it quits. The tones vary, and experienced monks can tell which hour it is, just by the bell's pattern, like hearing a ringtone and knowing who's calling, except it's always God. Canonical hours divide the day like slices of monastic pizza. You've got matins pre-dawn, lauds sunrise, prime, first hour of daylight, terce mid-morning, sext midday, none mid-afternoon, vespers, sunset, compline before bed. 8 slots, each with its prayers, rituals, and moods, some cheerful, some so solemn they make your socks wilt. The logic behind this schedule, divine alignment. Time wasn't just a human invention, it was considered sacred. God created the heavens and earth in a cosmic rhythm, so why shouldn't your toilet breaks follow a holy cadence too? Yes, even that. Let's not pretend monks didn't have bodily functions. You think you're sneaking out for a quick chamber pot trip, but the bell rings, and boom, you're late for sext. And guess who's now on latrine duty? You, forever. Or until Brother Martin fakes another stomachache. By the way, historians still argue whether these hours were always strictly enforced. Some monasteries were more chill Benedictine rule style. Others were basically time prisons with incense. It depended on the order, the century, and how much the abbot believed in literal, divine micromanagement. Let's talk sleep, or the lack thereof, because when you hear midnight prayers, you might picture a serene candlelit chapel with soft chanting. In reality, it's cold, it's long, and it's repetitive. You chant psalms until your jaw goes numb. You kneel until your knees feel like boiled turnips. You stay alert enough not to accidentally chant the Magnificat in the wrong key again. Then it's back to bed, maybe. But the bell rings again in a few hours. What's wild is how monks internalized this cycle. After years in the monastery, they didn't need the bell anymore. Their bodies became clocks, muscle memory laced with divine guilt. Wake, pray, work, eat, pray again, sleep, wake again. Repeat until you're too old to chant or too saintly to care. And here's a quirky bit: monks weren't the only ones playing symphonies with their bells. In some places, entire villages synchronized daily life with the monastery's ring. Farmers tilled by terse traders rested at none, and even children learned to race home at the Compline bell like it was divine recess. Imagine living in a town where your work hours, meals, and bedtime were set by a monk pulling a rope in a stone tower. Kind of makes modern time zones feel rebellious, doesn't it? Still, the system had beauty. Bells gave rhythm to lives that might otherwise blur into one long gray chant. The sounds rose and fell with the day echoing across hills through fog and into the soul. The bell didn't just tell time, it gave it shape, and if you were the bell ringer, you carried enormous power. A good ring could keep the monastery in flow. A bad one, total chaos. Miss one ring and suddenly, Brother Peter's shaving at Laud someone's baking bread during Vespers, and the abbot looks like he's about to unsaint you with a spoon. Oh, and there's the ritual of bell blessing. Yes, bells were blessed, like holy relics. They had names. They were sprinkled with holy water and sometimes even given godparents. Because if you're going to organize eternal salvation around something that clangs, it had better be sacred. You lie back in your cot after Compline. You think the day is done. But then the bell rings again. One long note, low and mournful. Not a canonical hour. Not a scheduled prayer. This one's for Brother Thomas, who passed in his sleep. In the monastery, time keeps moving, even when someone doesn't. You wake again to the familiar sound of dripping. Not rain, not a leak. Just water plunking rhythmically into a brass bowl somewhere behind a wooden screen. It's not part of the building, it's part of the clock, or at least the closest thing your monastery has to one a water clock. A clepsydra if you want to impress someone who owns 3 Latin Bibles. Welcome to the age of medieval gadgetry, when monks weren't busy illuminating manuscripts or debating the theological weight of angel wings. They were experimenting with devices to count the uncountable. Because as handy as bells and birds are, sometimes you need something a bit more measurable. And what better medium than water? It's humble, it's holy, and crucially, it drips. You shuffle over to the contraption. It's not much to look at 2 ceramic bowls, one perched above the other, connected by a tiny hole no bigger than a lentil. The top bowl's filled with water. As it slowly drains, the lower bowl fills. Monks marked the inside with lines to measure the passage of time, each line representing perhaps a half hour. The simplicity is almost poetic, but the accuracy? Let's just say medieval monks were blessed with patience. Changes in temperature messed with flow rates. Debris clogged holes. One overenthusiastic brother reportedly tried to speed up time by enlarging the hole with a stick. The resulting flood was not well received. Still, Clepsydrus had one major advantage: they worked at night. And in monasteries, where matins began in the dead of pre-dawn, that mattered. No sun, no problem. Just listen for the drips, drips, and drip. It's like the world's slowest and most judgmental metronome. But if water clocks were too fussy, there was another option: sand. Yes, the hourglass. Or more often, the quarter-hour glass, because nobody trusted these things to keep going for a full 60 minutes. Picture a chubby wooden frame with two glass bulbs joined at the middle. Sand runs from top to bottom, measuring time the way a grumpy baker measures dough rise, sort of. You flip it, and the fine sand begins to fall. Tickless, gearless, beautifully silent, except for when someone coughs too close and shakes the table. Monks didn't invent hourglasses, but they adopted them with enthusiasm. They were portable, quiet, visually satisfying. Plus, they gave a sense of certainty in a world where the sun might sulk behind clouds for a week. Still, there was debate about their use. Some orders thought they were too secular, too merchanty. After all, the hourglass was also beloved by ship captains and apothecaries, hardly beacons of saintliness. Historians still argue whether their presence in cloisters was a practical necessity or a scandalous concession to the world outside the walls. And then there's the fire hazard. One creative monk supposedly tried to pair a sand timer with a tiny candle to make an auto-resetting hourglass. That idea lasted until the candle burned through the base. The kitchen ceiling has never quite smelled the same. Other odd timekeeping tools existed too, like oil lamp clocks, where the descent of oil marked the passage of time, or elaborate candle clocks, where weights tied to the wax were gradually lowered as the candle burned. If a weight hit the table with a thunk, time was up. If the candle flickered too much and burned unevenly well, time had a little wiggle room that day. And sometimes the body itself became the clock. Remember your internal rhythm. It's back. You know your prayer of lauds takes about 45 minutes. You know that cleaning the chapel floors without Brother Francis complaining takes approximately 2 Kyrie Ellison chants and 1 Gloria Patri. You count by chant, by breath, by repetition, and when that fails, you guess. Because no matter how clever the device drip grain flame, it was always an approximation. Time wasn't rigid, it was textured, a little stretchy. One moment could feel like eternity, another could vanish like incense smoke on a cold morning. Still, you relied on these tools. They were companions more than instruments. A monk might tend his water clock with the same care he gave his herb garden, dusting it, cleaning it, whispering soft prayers as the bowl slowly filled. The sound of water ticking time becomes soothing, familiar, the background noise of your sacred routine. But one day, something changes. A traveling scholar arrives from Italy. He's wiry, sunburned, and suspiciously proud of his luggage. Inside it, a device with gears, wheels, weights, something almost magical in its precision. A mechanical escapement clock. It doesn't drip. It doesn't burn. It ticks, steadily, coldly. And for a brief moment, the monastery trembles, not from earthquakes or heresy, but from the realization that time is about to become mechanical. You stand in the cloister staring at it. The gears tick, the weights descend with unnatural discipline, the pendulum swings, left, right, marking each second like a stern schoolmaster with a ruler. The mechanical clock doesn't chant. It doesn't pray. It doesn't need candlelight or clear skies or Brother Martin's suspiciously accurate gut instincts. It just is. This is the future. Well, not quite yet. Mechanical clocks are still rare, still mostly confined to cathedrals or wealthy urban centers. But you humble monk that you are, have seen the shadow of things to come, and frankly, it's unsettling. You watch the scholar tinker with the escapement. He adjusts the tension on the gear, and the tick becomes crisper, like the heartbeat of an iron angel. Nearby, Brother Thomas mutters something about the death of soulfulness. Brother Jerome looks like he's about to faint. And you wonder what this means for your time, because up until now, time has been, well, yours, sort of. Time in the monastery was intimate. It breathed with you. It bent around your moods, your chants, the weather, and the whims of wax. It wasn't always precise, but it was alive. This thing, it's exact, unbending, mechanical. Suddenly prayers must start not when the candle burns to a notch, but at the stroke of a wheel. Meals arrive not when the sun passes over the east cloister wall, but when the gears say so. Time begins to mean sameness, discipline, a quiet tyranny ticking in the background like a distant judge. And you feel it, a new kind of pressure. Before, if you were late to terce, maybe the candle burned too fast. Maybe the sky lied. Maybe the bell ringer fell asleep again. It was forgivable, human. But now, if you're late, you're wrong. No excuses. The machine doesn't care if your knees hurt or your chant was particularly intense. The gears don't sympathize. The spiritual rhythm becomes a schedule. Time is no longer felt, it is enforced. And here's the strange irony. The monks who had for centuries tried to master time with dripping bowls and echoing bells are the very ones who helped build these machines. Some of the earliest clockmakers were monks, tinkering in dusty towers, obsessing over precision. Perhaps they believed that by crafting the perfect timepiece, they could better serve God. Historians still argue whether mechanical clocks were embraced or resisted by monastic orders. Some abbots saw them as divine instruments tools to perfect holy discipline. Others feared them as soul-flattening gadgets that replaced intuition with automation. But either way, once seen, they were never quite forgotten. The clock spreads slowly. It climbs towers in cities. It plants itself in town squares. Eventually, it invades homes. Even the quiet hills around the monastery seem to tick faintly with the echo of this new order. And here's the kicker, you can't unhear it. Even when the mechanical clock is packed away, its rhythm haunts your senses. You find yourself measuring chant lengths, not by candles, but by imagined ticks. You count your steps to the refectory in even beats. Time no longer flows, it marches. And that's the shift, from fluid to fixed, from feeling to format, from lived experience to scheduled obedience. You begin to miss the soft uncertainty of candle clocks, the wild inconsistency of water bowls, the charm of waiting for a songbird to chirp out none, because there was grace in that vagueness, in knowing time by scent, by breeze, by belly growl. You didn't just follow time, you were inside it, moving with it, singing alongside it. Now time is external, a wall-mounted overlord, clicking. Still you adapt. Humans always do. You get used to the tick. You learn to kneel on the hour. You time your prayers with mechanical precision. You even find comfort in its regularity. But sometimes, just before matins, You blow out your candle and listen. No ticking, no bells, just the faint drip of water in the old clepsydra Brother Thomas keeps in the back chapel. Still working, still slightly off, still alive. And now the bells are quiet. The gears rest. You've drifted through candlelight and water bowls, through cloisters filled with cold air and soft footfalls, through the sacred bout of days, measured not by clocks, but by breath and wax and wind. You're lying back on a straw-filled mattress, your robe bunched up beneath your shoulder. The stone walls around you no longer feel cold, they just feel still. A familiar kind of still. The kind that wraps itself around you like time used to, loosely, imperfectly, but always gently. The last candle in the chapel is burning low now. The wax has pooled the flame flickers, and the light dances shadows across the old wooden beams. You can almost hear the whisper of a chant echoing from the past. A psalm, maybe, or just the memory of one. Outside, the moon is finally showing up. No bells ring. No scholar fusses with a gear. No one is counting. And yet time moves on, softly, silently, like a breath before sleep. So let your mind wander through cloisters and echoing chapels. Let it drift across sundials and smoky candles, the sand timers and leaky bowls. Let it forget the ticking. Let it return to that place where time was felt more than measured, sung more than said. Let go of schedules. Let go of gears. Let go of knowing exactly when. You're here. You're safe. You're out of time in the best possible way. Good night and sleep well.